What is going on, Bucs fans? Back here live at the Pirate Parlay podcast. I'm your host, JC Allen, on the Sick Podcast Network. And man, the draft is in the books. And the Bucs had a very productive draft. We talked about Graham Barton the day after the draft, gave our instant reactions on that. We're going to run through the rest of this draft class. We'll touch back on Barton a little bit, and then we'll also jump into maybe some of these undrafted free agents that might have an opportunity to make the team. Some of what the defensive coaching staff said about the guys yesterday. At their media availability and a bunch more. So come stick around, stay tuned. We'll be right back after the break, taking all your questions, comments, and going through this Bucs draft.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to the Sick Podcast. Pirate Parlay.
Battle intercepted, picked off in the end zone. Bucs are going to beat the Chiefs. We're the champions of the world.
The sickest Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. It's going to be sick.
We're back at it on the other side of the break again. Feel free to drop comments, questions, concerns, whatever you're feeling like about this Bucs draft. 7 picks in total. We went through Graham Barton, who was their number 1 overall pick. Right after the draft, we did an immediate reaction there at number 26. Look, I was shocked Barton was there. I still can't believe that he was available for them. I had him going way higher than that. And I think the Bucs are stoked. I know the Bucs are stoked that he fell to them at 26. And I think the Dallas Cowboys might be kicking themselves in the rear end for thinking they can move back and getting him a couple picks later. But just to touch back on him, he's going to be a guy, just talking to him. Obviously, he had the media availability. You can watch that. But we had a little powwow with him afterwards. And this is just a very mature guy. He's going to put his all into everything he does, into his craft, chasing his dreams of becoming not only just a good NFL player, but a great NFL player. You listen to some of the people talking about him. Nick Saban, when he was drafted, thinks he'll be, a 12-year guy, multiple-time Pro Bowler. You read it here and there. Some people are saying that, he's a top 10 center already. Mel Kiper Jr. saying that. So, you look at what the Bucs got, whether he's playing at center or guard, and that's going to be something that we'll see happens. We've talked to John Spytek, the assistant general manager. He kind of alluded that, yeah, we draft him as a center, but if our best 5 happen to be him at guard and maybe Hainsey at center, then that's how they're going to roll. So there's a lot of position flexibility with him. He's not going to kick out at tackle. But if something happens, maybe he gets kicked out there in a pinch and he's not going to lose a game for you. So there's a whole bunch of versatility with him that he brings. There's a world we live in where maybe he's a guard this year and moves to center after Hainsey's contract, is up next year. So, I go back to what I wrote about him, position flexibility after starting at center his freshman year as a true freshman, finishes his career at tackle. Most believe he's either a center or guard in the NFL. He explodes out of his stance, balance and position to sustain blocks, has great grip strength, blocking to the whistle, the athleticism and quick feet to be a factor against speedier rushers pulling in space. And it's just kind of all the intangibles that you want as far as character. Football is life for him. It's a passion for him. I remember talking to his position coach last week and him telling me, first one in, last one out. He's studying film and breaking it down throughout the week, falling asleep because he's sitting there watching so much film. He's in practice demanding more coaching tips from the coach when he's trying to teach the freshman. He's on a 10-play drive that results in a touchdown, but had bad technique on the second drive and is still pissed off about it when he's coming off the field after they just scored. These are things that really just show his character and that, he's a perfectionist and he's going to work his tail off no matter what position he's spot to be the best he can be. I spoke with, one of the offensive assistants there. They called him, said that he was a professional before he was a professional. He lived his lifestyle like that. And I asked him about that. What do you think that meant? And he said, I just think I carry myself as a professional in every aspect, whether it's my, getting enough sleep or eating the right things or training the right way or studying the right way. All those things are going to lead to success for him, instant success for him, I think, at the next level. So it was a great pick. We went into detail on it, so I won't linger on him too much. But I think it was a great pick for the Bucs and really solidifies, one or two of those interior spots. I think they need to, obviously, as we, we kind of talked about center. They need to get bigger up in the middle. That was a point of emphasis the Bucs wanted to make. Getting a guy who's bigger, stronger, his athleticism off the charts. You look at his relative athletic score, his RAS score, #1 since 1987 for all centers, #2 for guards since 1987. He's just an athletic guy, gets out in space easily, pulls easily, is nasty demeanor, finisher, plays violent, and it's everything the Bucs look for in their center. So I thought it was a great pick for them. Obviously edge rusher was the #1 need on this team. I think interior line was right there with it, but a premier guy that teams have to game plan against that just didn't fall in the way that they wanted to into their laps, but they still were able to address that position in the draft. They selected Chris Braswell from Alabama at 57. He's 6'3", 251, ran a 4.6 40. 4-year junior. He had to sit behind some pretty good guys in Dallas Turner and a guy like Will Anderson. But at that Bama program, you are going up against the best of the best. We asked them they asked him who's the toughest tackle that he's ever gone against. Cause he's like, can I say JC Latham? He had plenty of experience going against top echelon talent in the SEC and other conferences that he had to face. Obviously on his own team with JC Latham. I wrote about him. I said he's got an explosive first step, natural strength, not overly fast, but has a pursuit speed to track down ball carriers, has an array of moves at his disposal and displays effective speed to power, knocking back even the biggest blockers. However, he doesn't always play with great technique and has an inconsistent anchor setting the edge. He doesn't have great bend to turn the corner and lacks experience dropping in coverage. Now, he did drop in coverage about 55 times, but, that's going to be completely different. And the NFL is a different game than college when dropping into coverage. So, that's something that he's got some experience, but he doesn't have a ton of it. And, Bowles is going to get him right real quick. But again, you go back to what John Spytek said about him. Sometimes it's nice to have those fast, speedy guys who can turn the edge with great bend and turn the corner. But it all starts if you can't use power, you can't knock blockers back. Then they just, going up against guys like Tristan, he's just going to move laterally and just take you out of the equation. So being able to have that strength, that pop to knock someone back is a key part of being a top echelon edge rusher. Do I ever think he'll be a premier guy, a #1 game plan type of guy? I don't think so, but I do think that he brings enough ability to be a strong contributor, potentially even, be a starter for this Bucs team sometime down the road this season. What he also does is he prevents you from having to completely retool the room next year. Remember, Anthony Nelson's up. His contract's up. Randy Gregory only has 1 year on his deal. And Joe Torian-Shoyinka, whose 5th-year option was just declined, as a free agent. So it leaves you going to the next year with a guy like Chris Braswell and Yaya Diaby. A little bit more money. Maybe you address that premier guy, or maybe, you manipulate the board to get up and get one. There's a stronger class of edge rushers next year. We'll see how everything pans out, but I like the pick, right? I wasn't high on him at first. He wasn't one of my best fits. I liked Adisa Isaac a little bit better. I definitely like Marshawn Nealon better. Of course, he went 1 pick before to Dallas. They had him in for a 30 visit and a formal. Dallas is like, well, you got Barton in front of us. We're not going to let you take Nealon in front of us in the 2nd round. So I think he would have been considered there. But I do like Barton after, speaking with him, after watching a little bit more, looking at it a little bit more. I think he's going to be a strong edge rusher for them. He's not going to win with dominating speed around the edge, but he's going to be able to knock back some guys. I think the things that he needs to work on are technique things. They've got a pretty good coach. I'm not sure if you know George Edwards. He coached guys like Daniil Hunter and obviously Micah Parsons with the Cowboys. So he'll get him right, I think. As far as, anchoring better against the edge, using technique better and these things. And they're really pumped to have him. The bowl scheme is all about pressures, and they look at a guy who led the SEC in pressures last year, had 10.5 tackles for a loss, 8 sacks, and can kind of bring it at that level. He's got an NFL frame already, doesn't really need to get, too much bigger. This was a really big year for undersized edge rushers, right? There wasn't those JTSs, those 6'5", 6'6" guys, 270 something. There was more guys around like 6'3", 6'4", 250. So, he can always get stronger. And, he can always work, with the NFL strength and condition to get a little bit faster, a little quicker, a little better movements and stuff like that. But that's going to come with coaching. So I think it was a good pick for them. I really do. You need an edge rusher. Again, where they were picking, I thought it was great value. I thought he was probably going to be gone somewhere between 40 and 50. Falls to them at 57. So it was a great value for them. And again, addresses one of the needs that they have on this roster. The edge room now looking like Braswell, Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, Yaya Diaby, Randy Gregory, Anthony Nelson. Then they've got two young guys they really like too, and Marquise Watson, Jose Ramirez. Jose mostly did all of his stuff behind the scenes. So we'll see how that battle shakes out. They'll probably keep around 5 of them. So really, you look at it, you've got 5 spots for 7 guys, and we'll see too what they do as far as making moves, because this is the time the second wave of free agency is coming, right? You have your first initial wave where it's the free agency frenzy. Then you kind of have some trickle signings, leading up to the draft. And then after the draft, yesterday or Monday rather at 4:00 was the day where signing free agents don't count against your compensatory picks. So you can start, and we've already seen guys start to, Zay Jones was just released by the Jags, and other players will be released as well once teams kind of further assess their board and kind of figure out where they want to trim salary cap, where they feel like they're good now with the draft picks they have, where they want to give younger guys, opportunities and shots. So there will be a second wave of free agency coming here. And if they want to add, there's still some decent pass rushers they could add to the mix. We'll see what they do, but right now I feel like they have a pretty strong room. And they've got some guys who can help them, do exactly what they need to do, is get after the pass rusher. I know sacks are sexy, and Anthony Edwards said that, or George Edwards said that too, himself, the edge rushing coach, outside linebacker coach. The pressure is any way you can affect the quarterback is positive for this defense. So pressure is the name of the game for the Bucs on defense, and I think they added another guy that's going to be able to put some pressure. We got some people in the chat. Hi guys, we got Nathan, really even. Nathan asks, will you be a part of Operation Fill the Boat 2025? I will definitely be on the Bucs cruise. I'll be having my article come out probably either today or tomorrow, promoting that. Jeremy, Dan, Christopher, Jeff, appreciate you guys for stopping. If you guys have any questions on these guys, we'll definitely get to them. I see Rayleigh's got one about Bucky. We'll wait till we get to the Bucky Irving part of the show. But any questions on Graham, any questions on Braswell, as we move on to Tyke Smith. I just spoke with his position coach, Fran Brown, who's now the head coach at Syracuse this morning. So he gave me some good stuff. So let's jump into Tyke Smith. 3rd round pick. They got him at 89 out of Georgia, 5'10", 202, 4'4", 40. This is a guy, he played the star position at Georgia, acting as that, big nickel linebacker. Few snaps out at cornerback, few snaps at deep safety, way more quarter snaps at nickel. He's a real nickel, but he's also played a bunch of snaps, around 500 snaps at strong safety in the box. So, but that's where he does his best work near the line of scrimmage. Tremendous tackler, great football IQ, the ability to stick with tight ends and big slot receivers and coverage. Great instincts, patience to read routes and route developments, quarterback's eyes and make plays on the ball. You look what he did last year, 70 tackles, 8 loss, 2 sacks, 6 pass breakups, 4 interceptions. He was a guy who was high on the Bucs radar. They have a formal meeting with him at the Combine, have a top or an official 30 visit with him in the building there. So he's a guy who is, coach's dream, as his college coach said. He's a guy you tell him once and he gets it. He's a guy that, is going to bust his butt trying to pick things up, and he'll get the system down, the scheme down fairly quickly. And he's a guy who you can use all over the field. He's going to be like a Swiss Army knife, right? You can use him at that linebacker spot in dime positions where you have him lined up next to Levante. You can use him in the nickel if he wins that battle against, a very strong competition at nickel And you can play him at strong safety too. So, I mean, he's going to battle Christian Izien down there, who's the starter last year. They brought in Tavier Thomas as well, another slot guy. It's funny, last year's draft was a draft where you were really looking only at safeties who can play nickel. This year's draft had so many nickel cornerbacks and nickel safeties in it. When the Bucs really needed that guy last year, I ended up having to go with undrafted free agent Christian Izien because there was only a few of them, and they were mostly safeties. That like Jamie Robinson and Quan Martin, those guys were like, okay, these could be the nickel guys. This year was full of guys who can play inside, outside. Mike Sanistrill was one of them. TJ Tampa was one of them. Enos Rakestraw was one of them. You kind of go down the line. Andrew Phillips. I mean, there was so many cornerbacks and safeties that can play the nickel in this draft that the Bucs probably felt like they had to come away with them since they couldn't come away with one last year. But yeah, Jeremy asked, do you think Bowles will utilize Izien at safety as Smith becomes a nickel? And it's going to be, Nick Rapone kind of let the cat out of the bag last year. Yesterday, talking about that safety room and that and where these guys can line up. And Tyke Smith's going to get cross-trained at strong safety and nickel. Tavier Thomas cross-trained at strong safety and nickel, more of a nickel cornerback, but he'll dabble in the safety realm just in case injuries hit. Kayvon Merriweather is going to be played strong last year. He's going to get cross-trained at free safety. And Izien, as you alluded to, he'll get cross-trained at free safety too. So talk about the versatility of Tyke Smith. Is the situation where you can have a guy like Izien on the field with Smith at the same time, right? They dropped to those nickel. If KJ Britt wins the competition, again, Larry Foote said he's got a lot to prove to Bowles to stay on all three downs. But when they're in real passing downs where it's third and long situations and such, fourth and long when teams are going for it, they can utilize Tyke Smith, like I said, as that linebacker role next to a Levante David and still have Izien on the field as a nickel. Now, it's easy to pencil in him because he's a third round draft pick and obviously outstanding production. Went to a school, he was, again, the big thing, Alabama and Georgia, these guys are winners, right? And that means something. But he's still got a battle to win it. Izien's not going to roll over and say, all right, you were drafted, I was, and take the spot. So he's going to be in a tough battle. They've got some undrafted guys, too, we'll get into later in the show, that are really going to put up a fight, too. So they've got a lot of competition at the nickel this offseason, and it should be fun to watch. I think some of the things where Tyke struggles with, he's only 5'10", 202, so because of his height and frame, he's gonna struggle. He can struggle with some bigger blockers, but he's not afraid to get down there dirty with them. He'll come down and hit some of those big offensive linemen who are climbing or pulling and everything like that. He's like a heat-seeking missile when it comes to coming downhill and playing in run support. So, but coverage limitations. He's not the fastest. He's not going to be able to play deep safety, taking deep routes. Because his long speed, recovery speed's not there. Then he can kind of be over aggressive in pursuit angles. It just comes with aggressive tendency. I asked him, how do you balance the two out? And, he's like, you want to make plays in the ball no matter where you are, whether you're in coverage and attacking or you're attacking, the quarterback's eyes, or you're coming downhill as a ball carrier. So it's something that he's going to have to, kind of have patience with as he gets into the system and as he gets up to NFL speed. And again, that's, I think, one of the biggest things that he's going to have to do is just the speed of the game. All rookies have to deal with that, right? So, but I think he'll be a heck of a pick. He was one of my best fits. I had him as a best fit for the Bucs in round 3 to 4. So happy I nailed that one. And in the back-to-back pick here with Jaylen McMillan out of Washington, the wide receiver, he went at 92. He was another one of my best fits. I thought he'd be a selection for the Bucs in round 3 to 4. And what I wrote about him: 6'1", 197, 447, 447 40. He was a 4-year junior, redshirted his first year, but he's the other Washington wide receiver, not named the Dunze or Polk, but he worked mostly out of the slot. He's got a diverse route tree, a knack for finding the open spot in the field, strong to the catch point, has an explosive release, and is a willing blocker. He still needs to show he can hold up against more physical corners and prove he can stretch routes vertically consistently. But he's a guy I think that is an immediate challenger for Trey Palmer on the outside. He's a guy who he definitely needs to get bigger, definitely needs to get stronger. And I think a year in an off season going into next season in an strength and conditioning program in the NFL, where he's literally spending the offseason learning the system, getting in stronger, better shape as far as, to hold up to an 18-game schedule in the NFL and everything. I think he might have a chance to replace a guy like Godwin, but he's not a guy. He's not Godwin, right? No one's Godwin. So he'll have the opportunity to kind of step in that role if Godwin does depart. But I don't think he's a carbon copy of him by any means. He's going to play out in the Z, play out wide this year with Godwin going back inside. But again, these guys are going to be interchangeable, right? Evans is going to be in the slot. Godwin's going to be in the slot. They'll both be outside. And I think with having him and Trey Palmer, and even to a lesser extent, Rakim Jarrett, it gives the guys a nice rotation after Mike and Chris. And he's going to compete for that job with Trey Palmer primarily. And we'll see who comes out victorious. But I feel like they're really excited about this guy. They didn't think he was going to be there. I spoke to one of the coaches there over at Washington. He's now the quarterback's coach in Alabama, because that whole staff pretty much went there. So I think the run of Huskies might come to a close here. We might see a run of Bama guys, just because they love that program and how they get these guys ready. So be prepared if him and their final, their 7th round draft pick were the last of the Huskies to be kind of brought in. But, he's just talking about the player he is. He's a hard worker. I thought he was extremely underrated. And that if he was in a situation where he didn't get injured and missed 4 games, he'd be talked about as a guy going in the 2nd, early 3rd round instead of the late 3rd round. A lot of people had him early 3rd round. So, you're looking at another 2nd round guy, and they're having a number 1 wide receiver in the draft in the 1st round and 2 2nd round picks if he didn't get hurt. You look at his production the year prior, and it rivaled the Doomsdays. He was one of the best players on that team. So I think when you look at McMillan, they can use him in a variety of ways, putting him in motion. He's going to get, again, he's going to struggle with physical corners. So like coming off press man is not going to be his strong suit, especially going across the middle of the field where there's a lot of traffic and guys are bumping and kind of get away with a little more physicality. But, if you put him in motion, again, kind of like Jeff Olson said, like they did with Puka Nacua, and Josh Capo alluded that to, we were on John Ledyard's podcast yesterday, using him in motion, getting him free releases. That's where he's going to do his best work, again, until he can get a little bit stronger going over the middle over the field and kind of put on a little bit more bulk. But I think he's, again, a great pick for the Bucs. You talk about where the Bucs kind of went as far as last year and the year before, right? Character, leadership, culture. These are guys that fit right in. They may not have extremely high ceilings, but the floors are NFL productive players. So I think, again, another great pick by Jason and his staff. And it doesn't help that he's not only going to come in with a guy that he played with, but also have a few guys on the team he knows. It always helps the transition as well. Jeff Olson again mentioned, Jaylen McMillan is this year's Puka Nacua. I don't know if he is Puka Nacua, but I think he can have good production coming out of the 3. What Puka did was just insane. So I don't know if the production will be there. Really even went back to Tyke Smith saying, I think Tyke will be used all over the place in this defense, JC. I think Todd is going to use all these chess pieces and move them everywhere to throw off offenses. And I completely agree. And I don't think it's limited to Tyke. I think you're talking about a guy like Joe Tryon-Shoyinka. I think you're talking about a guy like Chris Braswell, who's been able to kick inside in certain packages. I think you're talking about, you had Vita Vea and Kalijah Cansey and Anthony Nelson as stand-up linebackers last year. They can do a lot of different things. Zion McCollum, they can give him crazy looks because he's got experience at the nickel, at the left side, on the right side, at free safety, strong safety. So, they have Antoine Winfield can play strong nickel, free safety. So they have, and with Whitehead's increased range, you're not afraid to put him out back. That's one of the things that safeties coach Nick Rapone talked about yesterday. One of the biggest things he increased was his range. They wouldn't put him out back. They wouldn't put him deep. But the Jets did that. And, he's had 4 interceptions last year for him. So I think there's going to be a lot of versatility with these guys. That's always the key, right? They want guys that they can line up all over the place. Vita Vea, Kalijah Kancey are lined up at Y9, right way outside the tackle box last year. So there's a lot of versatility, and I think Tyke Smith brings that. I think Braswell brings a level to that as well. And it allows Bowles to kind of mix and match his disguises and coverages. And, you bring these guys down, you don't know who's dropping. Coach, I think it was Coach Foote talking about their five linemen defense. So they have 5 linemen on the field, and you got a guy like Vea and Cansey, and then a guy like JTS, and you'll have a guy like Braswell this year and Yaya Diaby, and you don't know who's dropping, who's coming. So these simulated pressures too are huge. So I think he's gonna be a good fit because he can come play down in the box. Tyke can and give you another looks too. You have Tyke and you have Antoine come down on the box. You don't know who's blitzing because both of them have shown that they can be effective blitzers. So the defense should be a lot of fun. The offense should be a lot of fun. We're talking to Rachaad White tonight over at Bucs Game Day on Hear the Cannons. So we're going to ask him what he thinks about the new offense, the new scheme, the new, Liam Cohen as a new coordinator. We'll ask him what he thinks about having a new running mate in the backfield here, which is Bucky Irving, who they drafted in the 4th round. Bucky Irving, 5'9", 192, 4.55 40. He's a junior, played his first year at Minnesota before transferring over to Oregon. And this is a guy who I didn't have high on my radar just because I looked at the size, and shame on me, right? I looked at the size. I looked at the highlight tapes, and I saw, wow, this guy moves like crazy. He's breaks tackles and makes guys miss like no tomorrow. But is he what the Bucs are looking for, right? That's what I asked myself. Are they looking for a guy who can be that thunder to Rashaad's lightning? Are they looking for someone who can pick up those tough yards? Because I don't have to tell you guys that 3rd and short, 3rd and goal, 4th and goal has been a nightmare for the Bucs. They have struggled so hard to be able to pick up those, 1 and 2 yard gains to keep drives sustained, to the fact where, Bowles doesn't have confidence in the offense and will punt it. And you're like, well, what are we punting for? We're at midfield, but he just doesn't have that confidence. And I think adding a guy like Graham Barton will help that for sure, because you got more size and push and nastiness in the middle, whether that's at center or guard. But I think Bucky Irving is a guy who can also kind of bring that in a weird way, right? He's 5'9", but he doesn't play like he's 5'9". It's kind of like, I saw something, Braylon Allen and Bucky Irving are like the two guys have the extremely different body sizes, but they play like they should be the other guy. And Bucky, great contact balance. He's like a little ping pong ball in there, just bounces off tacklers. He's got the ability to make defenders miss, with 69 missed tackles last year, 743 yards after contact. He's got great vision and footwork, good burst. He's patient at the line. He's more than capable receiver. He had 95 career receptions, through his 3 years at college. Again, he's undersized, though. He's not going to be a force in short yardage situations. That's not a guy that he's going to be. But he's quicker than fast, and he's deceptive, right? He had, junior season, he had 1,180 yards rushing, 11 touchdowns, 56 receptions for 413 yards and 2 scores. So he's versatile. He's not a one-trick pony. He's going to be able to get some chunk yards and make people miss in the running game and be a nice change of pace spell back for Rachaad. But, if you got him out there and you're in a hurry up package and you can't get Rachaad off the field back on the field, and you need to throw the ball, he's not going to be somewhere where you're like, oh, great. We got old stone hands out there. He's a guy who's prolific as a receiver, 56 receptions last year. So I think when you look at the situation with the Bucs, felt like they needed another running back. Yeah, they have Chase Edmonds back, and he provided a jolt when he was healthy, but keyword when he was healthy. Sean Tucker had a really late start to the whole process with that heart issue that came up. And, I think they're still high on him, what he can be. If not, he's a guy who can kind of be that bigger back in the backfield. Really struggled in pass protection last year. He was at number 2 back, but quickly found himself not only, at the bottom of the depth chart, but inactive for the most of the rest of the season. because you can't pass block. It's going to be hard for you to get on the field. And that's a spot that Bucky struggles in too, because he's 5'9", 192 pounds, but he's willing. He's going to, he's going to get blown up by Micah Parsons knowingly, and he's going to stand up to that challenge. So I thought it was a good pick for them. I liked Isaiah Davis a lot. Another guy that I liked. I didn't think Ray Davis was kind of on the board for them after kind of talking to some people. I know another prospect that got, and a lot of Bucs fans wanted them to maybe grab at in that 4th round was a guy like Christian Mahogany. Again, another guy who wasn't on the board for them really, with some different concerns. But Ray Davis was more of, a little too similar to Rachaad White. But I think, when you bring in a guy like Bucky Irving, he's fired up. He's going to wear number 7, which is going to be cool. Last time we saw 7 on a running back was Leonard Fournette. So we'll have 1 and 7 out in the backfield. And I think the versatility, they can put them both out there at the same time too. And, okay, you have them both running wheel routes. It's a mismatch for linebackers on either side. And it really kind of gives another dimension to this offense there. So got another couple questions in here. Again, what's going on, guys? Do I play guitar? I strum the guitar. I don't know if I can play the guitar, but really, Evan asked, do you think Bucky Irving can contribute to the offense this year? Will he only be used on special teams? I think he's going to contribute both areas. I talked to his position coach again. One thing that he told me that was really interesting is he said, Bucky was the leader on offense last year for the Oregon Ducks. He was the voice of the locker room. Guys turned to him, which is interesting because Bo Nix was a quarterback. He was a 1st-round pick to the Broncos, and then Troy Franklin obviously fell into the 4th round. But he was a guy holding each other accountable. He was a guy who's getting everybody hyped up, and not just a leader by example, but not afraid to pull guys aside. And he's had a really tough life, losing his dad, losing his brother, and kind of grinding, making his way out of south side. I think it's south side of Chicago. So he doesn't take anything for granted. He's a workhorse as far as in the building, studying, lifting, getting his mind right. So I think he's going to be part of that equation in kick return. Obviously, they've got a couple guys they can try out there. I think Devin Tompkins is still here, so he'll get a shot. Maybe you put Trey Palmer there now that you have a little more insurance at wide receiver from McMillan. So I think what they've done there, and part of the reason probably because he's so elusive and making guys miss tackles, is the new format. With a guy like Bucky back there, he can do some damage. So the next pick was one of my favorite picks in the draft, especially getting to know him more because I didn't know. I was Elijah Klein. Who's that? It's funny. I'm sitting in the media room and I get the nod and I'm like, Klein. Who's that? He's like number 300 and something on Brugler's Beast, Beast board there. So we get him up there, and again, we're in the media room there, waiting from picks 125 to 220. We're just starting to get drained in there. Energy's low. We go and talk to this kid, Elijah Klein, and we immediately get a jolt of energy through our system. That's the kind of what he brings, the passion, the energy he brings. But played at UTEP all 6 years, 6'3", 306, 5'3", 240, but his agility testing was much better than that. I wrote that he's got the size and length teams covered for interior linemen. He excels in zone, has experience in all the different run schemes, but excels in zone, has a tremendous football IQ, displays great technique and footwork, and is an efficient moving in space, climbing to the next level and pulling. Looks to knock someone's head off. So when he's coming around the corner, trying to knock someone's head off. But however, he can get a little upright in his stance, doesn't have elite athleticism, needs some polishing and pass protection. He'll definitely need to work on quick adjustments moving inside and passing off defenders. So that's some of the things that I wrote about him. I really like him, though. When you look at, I looked up, just kind of wanted to see where he graded out as far as pass blocking, run blocking, offense, just overall offensive grade at PFF. And out of 2004, out of 100 and, out of four, I think it was 500. Let me get the exact number for you guys. Out of 628 guards that played in 2004, he finished as the seventh best with the seventh best overall grade at an 82.5. Out of 588 eligible guards, he finished with the number one pass blocking grade at 93.5 and the 14th best run blocking grade at 79.9. So, again, the competition wasn't always the top competition, but he did have some really good tape against some Power 5 conferences. Oklahoma was one of those games that he had a really good game against. And you kind of look at, he's got some experience, some versatility. I talked to two of his position coaches. One of them, the head offensive line coach, and he told me an interesting story. I mentioned the football, tremendous football IQ, right? Well, when he was a true freshman, they went away for training camp. It wasn't held in UTEP. They went down to New Mexico. He taught himself, and I've been saying this wrong. If you've heard me say this, I just went back and listened to it earlier today. As I'm starting to transcribe these things for quotes for stories. He taught himself the offense in 2 days. He knew the entire offense inside and out. Everything that he was supposed to do by, flashcards in his room after practices. He'd go back there and he'd just, after he lifted and everything like that, he'd go up there and he'd just kind of memorize the offense. So super smart, has the ability to play, all across the line. He would have been their number 3 center for them, number 2 left tackle, right tackle if they needed to go and tackle. Can play on the left side at guard, can play on the right side at guard. Most of his snaps came at right side. Most of experience at right side, but he does feel comfortable, putting his hand in the dirt on the left side as well. Has the all-time record at UTEP for starts, so like 54, because of the COVID year and he played in 4 games, started 4 games as a redshirt freshman. With the rules, you can start up to 4 games. So, another guy, he's as big as a fridge. Comes from an athletic background. His mom was a basketball player. His mom's a teacher. So again, kind of teaching himself the offense, teaching himself. Another story he told me was, he called him up, coach up one day and was like, "Coach, I got it figured out." And zone, just the wide zone scheme they were trying to run, just hit him like a brick and taught himself that. I'm sure you guys have seen the whiteboard up there where he's going over the whiteboard on Twitter. If not, it's on my page, kind of just breaking down. Another thing his coach had them do was every week they'd have him, a player that they were assigned to that they'd have to break down, study, and then present that to the rest of the group, the rest of the O-line. And coach said when he got up there, it was like, it's like a coach breaking it down. He's like a coach on the field. They can make all the calls. Obviously, it's a center's job, but he's aware of all the calls and communicate across the line. So I think he's going to be a great player for the Bucs. Really smart. He doesn't have great athleticism, but he's got really good short area quickness, and that's what you need. I think when you look at his split at the combine, if I can find it, his 40 time wasn't great, but his split numbers were really good. And really, that's all. When you're looking at offensive linemen and for the most part, defensive linemen, especially defensive tackles, true defensive tackles, you're really looking for their 10-yard split. How quickly can they move in space, right? You're not looking, because if you have a guard running 40 yards down the field, there's probably something wrong, unless he's, just covering and blocking. So I think his 10-yard split, I got it right here, was 1.89, which is pretty good. Again, his agility testing was good. He's got giant hands, pretty good wingspan, pretty good arm length. So I think he's going to be a great pick for them. I see, David Walsh asks, is he a potential starter or potential future starter? I think someone else asked about that as well. Christopher Cole, with a guard at UTEP being consideration for the starting left guard. Again, it's all going to be how quickly he can pick up the scheme, how quickly he can pick up the offense. I think he's got the talent for it. I think he does need to get stronger a little bit as far as play strength. Obviously, the speed of the NFL is completely different, but if he's getting reps going against Vita Vea and Kalijah, it's going to be a welcome to the NFL moment for him really quick. So, if you look at it right now, if they do want Graham Barton playing center, I think Hainsey probably locks in as that backup center. And then you're looking at Opita, Sua Opita, who they brought in from the Eagles, Ben Bridison, who they brought in from the Giants, and then of course, Elijah Klein, another guy, Brandon Walton, who's been a holdover for a couple of years, can play inside, outside versatility. So I think he's got an opportunity. It just depends on how things shake out, how quickly he can pick stuff up. And talking to his position coach, this is a guy, once he gets the playbook, he's going to know it. He's going to know the installs. He's going to know what to do. Then it's just being able to go out there and play and hold up and show that he can do it. But he's got the tenacity. He's got he described himself as a gritty, tough guy who just wants to lower his head and hit somebody. He's a small school guy. I talked to Coach Bain, which was the assistant offensive line coach. He actually played at Humboldt with Alex Kappa. Said a lot of his game reminds him of Alex Kappa. He even had Kappa, FaceTime Kappa and have him talk to the guys. And, so I think he's got the opportunity, if not this year, but next year again. Like I mentioned, if they feel like the starting best five is to have Hainsey at center, Graham Barton at guard, once Hainsey's contract is up, if they don't bring him back, it's a situation where maybe you see Graham Barton kick over to center and then Elijah Klein step in at guard, whether that's left side, right side. They move Moak over to left side. They've got some flexibility in the coming years if this guy does pan out, and I think I would not be one to bet against him. So, last pick of the draft, they waited till 246. They grabbed another Washington Husky. Again, that Husky reign might come to an end with the staff moving to Alabama, but they had to get one more guy, and it was Devin Culp, the tight end out of Washington, 6'3", 231, 4.47 40. And we talked to Liam Cohen earlier about what he's looking for, at the tight end room and stuff like that. And he mentioned, kind of the move tight ends that they had there and with the Rams, with a guy like Gerald Everett, with a guy like Tyler Higbee. And if the Bucs were looking for one, Cup was one of the best options in the draft. He's just 4.47, can move, mismatch nightmare if you get him out in the slot or get him out wide. He's more of a big receiver really than a tight end. His excellent speed, ability to elevate, make contested catches. He runs sharp routes, crisp cuts, gets consistent separation from defenders. His blocking has improved some, but he's going to struggle holding up in line when he's doing like sweeps and screens and stuff like that. He can work as a blocker in space, but if you're asking him to hold up in line blocking, it's not going to be it's not going to be pretty right now at this point. But and also be 24 years old, so 6 years. Didn't really make any catches his first 3 years. He's not a polished receiver. Only 66 receptions for 711 yards and 4 touchdowns in 6 years, but he's a mismatch guy, right? And if you want to put him out there against a linebacker to open other stuff up underneath or over the top, that's something that you can do, take a guy out of the equation. So, it's going to be interesting to see. And I know we've got a couple questions. Jeremy says, can Culp from Washington have a shot at beating out KO or Durham for a roster spot? And Richard kind of says the same thing. Will Culp be in front of Durham on the depth chart by the start of the season? I don't think he'll be on the front of the depth chart. But I know they don't want Cade Otton playing 88 snaps again, or 98 snaps again. They want to be able to, use other guys in that spot. And they're going to go to more, 11 personnel, which is just 1 tight end, 3 wide receivers. So he will get a break in that sense. But I think they're hoping, what they saw from Payne down the stretch. Remember, he was inactive for most of the first year. The beginning of the year, and then kind of came on late, had a couple of spectacular catches, right? A year in a strength and conditioning program. He's been at the facility all year round, working out, getting bigger, getting stronger. Will help him hold up as an inline blocker. And then again, he was never going to be this prolific, down the seam threat, tight end monster, Travis Kelce type. But what he was going to do is going to be a valuable threat on third downs because of his size and in the red zone. And we saw that on third down, making a couple of really nice catches as the year went on. End up with 2 starts on the season. So I think they're hoping he can kind of develop a little bit more this season and be that number 2 guy, especially because, they didn't take one late and the free agent cupboard is bare. Unless someone gets cut, there's really nothing available at tight end in the free agent market. And really, tight end is a position where there's really only a handful of top guys. You look at the league right now, you've got Andrews, you got Kittle, you got Kelce, Hawkinson. I don't know who else would you put in that list as top echelon tight ends? Schultz had a great bounce back year with the Texans last year. Is he in that list? But Then like guys like Goddard, is he in there? Sam Laporta, I think you can maybe mention in that top list after the year he had. But again, we got to see consistency with it. So there's not a ton of top tier tight ends. And I think K-Dot fits in that, 10 to 15 range somewhere there. And I think that's fine for what you have in him. He got much better as a blocker and can continue to improve on that. Again, another year in offseason strength and conditioning program under his belt will definitely help him. But I think then you look at the spot where it is that 3-4 spot, right, with Keith, and people were asking, and is he gone because Culp is here? And I think it really depends. They want to keep 4 tight ends. Last year was a more 2 tight end based set. I don't know if they want to keep 4 tight ends this year, since there's only going to be one tight end on the field the majority of the time. So, and you've got some guys you can use as a jumbo tight end in certain run packages, like a Justin School or something like that. So I think they'll probably stick with 3 tight ends this year. And then I think it comes down to, obviously, Devin Culp has yet to prove anything. Played a ton of special teams, though. And Keith has been one of the best special teams player on the team, but he doesn't offer anything as a blocker. I mean, as a receiver. And when he's out there on the field, he's out there as a blocker. So, I mean, not that it's going to be different with Culp on the field, because he's going to be a receiver, not going to offer you much as a blocker. But again, you have to be kind of multifaceted to secure a spot. So we'll see how that shakes down. I think right now, Keith is probably safe-ish, but we got to see how Devin Culp looks like in training camp and in OTAs and mini camp and stuff like that. If he shows up real quick, it's going to be a tough challenge for Keith to make this roster, because they've tried to get the ball in his hands, right? They've tried different things. He had a touchdown last year, got a touchdown with Tom his rookie year. But they tried to focus on him a few times. First 2 plays of the season went to Keith, couldn't reel him in. He had a drop touchdown in the end zone, that he couldn't reel in. So right now he's a blocking specialist and he's a core special teamer. What do you value more, with 2 Z tight ends already on the roster, or Y tight ends already on the roster, and K-Dot and Payne, who are, blocking / receiving tight ends? Do you want another guy who's just a blocker, or do you want a guy who can be more of a mismatch threat as a receiver, move receiver type guy like that? I kind of lean towards Culp beating Keith, but we got to wait till we see what's going on, through the offseason and training camp and stuff like that. So that does it for the Bucs draft picks. I'm incredibly impressed. Jason went from 125 to 220 without making a trade. Ended a streak of trades, 10 straight years, and kind of waited it out. And I think you got some great players. And that continues right over into undrafted free agency. We saw what the impact could be like last year, with guys like Raheem Jarrett coming in, getting some snaps, with guys like Christian Izzian winning that spot. Some of these other guys who kind of came in, Kayvon Merriweather, started 2 games for them. So they got contributions there. Sean Tucker, again, came out of training camp as RB2. We'll see what he does there. And you kind of look at, again, Devin Tompkins, and who's your return man, was an undrafted guy before. So they've gotten some luck out of undrafted guys. Mike Green, who's penciled in as number 6 defensive tackle. Some of the guys that I think could maybe kind of make a run to make this team. Kalen DeLoach, someone just asked about him. Can he win the MLB 2 job? I don't know if that's a realistic opportunity for him, but I do think he's got a shot at making this roster. We talked to Coach Backers for the Bucs, and he said, asked him if he was undersized, because he's only 5'10", about 205, 210 right now. Super productive player at Florida State, all over the field. But again, he's kind of undersized, and he said for today's NFL, with the passing and everything like that, he's a guy that can, kind of make a difference and make a team. So I think you got KJ Britt, Savassi Dennis locked in. So that 4th linebacker, maybe a 5th, because they do, linebacker bodies are good for special teams. Same thing with tight ends and running backs. Maybe they keep a 5th guy in there, but I think his immediate competition right now is JJ Russell. I also like Antonio Greer, the guy they brought from Arkansas. He played at USF as well. So Razorback, 6'1", 230. He's more traditional size. Doesn't have the speed Kalen DeLoach does. Kalen DeLoach's got a 4.47 40-yard dash. So he's, he was all over the place last year. He's had 11 sacks for his career, 11 pass deflections, 2 interceptions. He's all over the place with that speed. If they kind of wanted to, look at cornerback, they did bring in a guy like Marcus Banks, who can maybe move to safety. Tyler Funderburk is another, Funderburk is another cornerback they brought in from Appalachian State, played at Richmond. He's more the traditional size, 6 foot, had a lot of ball production, 11 interceptions, 2 defensive touchdowns, really good speed, 4.39. Marcus Banks, the guy who played at Mississippi State and Alabama. He might move to safety, more of a nickel type safety type guy. Again, they brought in, like when you talk about nickel guys, they brought in a guy like Marcus Banks, who's 6 foot, 190, played a lot in the nickel there. Chris McDonald, 5'10", 192. He's going to be in the mix for that nickel spot as well, probably. So, they brought in a lot of guys in the secondary. Rashad Wisdom is a safety that they brought in from University of Texas San Antonio. He's 5'9", 210. Again, he can play some nickel, but strong safety as well. He finished his career with 314 tackles, 13 for loss, 4 sacks, 4 forced fumbles, 2 fumble recoveries, 5 interceptions, 15 pass deflections. So again, Coach Rapone talked about, hey, they need 2 safeties. They got Whitehead, they got Winfield. They like what they've seen out of Merriweather. Of course, they feel like Tyreek can play there. Tyke can play there. They feel like Christian Izzy can play there. They know that they can, in a pinch, they can put Zion there. But, there's a spot that's potentially opened up for safety as well. So, having a guy like Rashad Wisdom come in, you can kind of compete for that as well. And then I think the offensive lineman, Avery Jones, is interesting to me. The kid out of Auburn, 6'4", 307 pounds. It's kind of, got the size that you want to see. I think he can be a guy. I think, let's see what Brugler had to say about him. But he was a guy that I kind of looked at. Let me just kind of find him where he's at here. But again, if you're always looking to develop linemen, and maybe not for the active roster, but at least for the practice squad, because you look at the offensive line, the way it's constructed, they only have at center interior guys. They have Sue Opeta, Brent Bredesen, and Robert Hainsey's on the last year of his deal. Brandon Walton's a UFA after this on his exclusive rights. So, they'll have him for another year as a restricted, but do you want to pony up that money to keep him around like $2 million, to something like that? Do you want to keep him? Do you want to invest the resources in re-signing Hainsey? That's a question for them as well. Justin School, their swing tackle, he's gone next year potentially as an undrafted free agent. So, you need to have these guys to bring in to kind of groom behind him. And Andrew Jones, he plays center. So, if Hainsey's gone and you have Graham Barton, you got someone on the practice squad who you can at least kind of groom at center and have them be kind of waiting in the wings, perhaps, to come to the main roster if you don't address it in free agency or the draft next year. Xavier Delgado, an offensive lineman from Missouri, 6 foot, 329, another guy who they can kind of mold behind the scenes, kind of like what they did with Silas Danzy last year. They really like his potential at tackle. And the only other really guy I think could, there's a couple wide receivers maybe who could make some noise. Latrell Jones out of Southern Miss, 6'1", 195. Wasn't really super productive, but 46 catches, 622, and 3 touchdowns. Ran a 4.5 40. Maybe he's kind of in the mix to earn a roster spot with some of the other guys on there. But if I'm looking at the rest of the team, I think Kalen DeLoach probably has the best shot, really realistically, at making the 53-man roster. I would then go to Judge Culpepper, the defensive tackle from Toledo and Penn State. Obviously, Brad Culpepper. So there's some lineage there. But 6'4", 293, career stats, 132, 19 for loss, 13.5 sacks, 9 that came last season, 2 forced fumbles, a fumble recovery, 2 pass deflections. Good pro day numbers, 5.5, 5.15 40-yard dash. I think he's got the ability to maybe challenge, make some noise. I think you look at the defensive line, how it's constructed. You've got Vea, you've got Cansey, you've got Logan Hall, you've got Greg Gaines. And then after that 6 linemen, I think it's kind of wide open right now. As far as competition goes, they could kind of go anywhere, right? Mike Green has been on the team for a couple of years, but do you trust him? I don't know if you completely trust him. He couldn't finish the season healthy last year, and if Judge Culpepper beats him out, I wouldn't be surprised by it. And the other guy, I think Kalen DeLoach, and maybe Rashad Wisdom has something to say in that safety room. So that's kind of the gist of the draft, the undrafted free agents. My thoughts, Ward Burns says Chris McDonald's going to turn some heads, undrafted cornerback. Again, I think he's a guy who can kind of, compete for that nickel spot, compete at corner. And we'll see what happens. We got rookie minicamp next Friday and Saturday, which will be interesting to kind of get our eyes on these guys. So that's going to do it for this wrap up. I did have a question from Facebook or Twitter from JT Olson. Do we love or hate 15 as a wide receiver number? I'm not a huge 15 guy. Chris Hogan wore it with the Pats and he had some success. So I, that's who I relate it to the most. But I think 15, it works because you have, 13, 14, 15. I think that's the way it works, right? Because you have Mike, Chris, McMillan. And I think that's the way it works when you have all 3 of those guys out there. But on a normal, I don't like the 15 number. So, but yeah, that's going to do it for me here on the Sick Podcast Network at Pirate Parlay. Again, JC Allen. Find all my work over at Bucs Game Day Sports Illustrated, Twitter handle at JC Allen NFL. If you guys are watching on YouTube, pop over and follow me. If you're watching on Twitter, please pop over to YouTube and like and subscribe and turn on the notifications. That's huge. I appreciate everyone for popping in and commenting. Always appreciative of that for sure. And then, we'll have our podcast here. The Cannons will be on tonight at 8:00 p.m. Eastern time. We'll have Rashad White on for a little bit. Then we'll kind of go through the same process, recapping the draft from front and beginning, and kind of get your thoughts, get your questions on it, take your guys' comments and stuff like that. So, again, I appreciate you guys. Appreciate all the support you show me. I appreciate the support you showed the podcast, and we'll be back again next week. Hopefully, we'll get a player or something on. I'm going to work my phone over here and see what we can get on. I want to kind of give them that space between the offseason and after the draft, but it's go time now. Offseason program starting up and running. I know they're in the building, so we'll get somebody on here soon. I plan on getting some of the coaches on here too, so we'll be rocking and rolling in that regard. And again, as always, thank you guys for tuning in to another edition of Pirate Parlay. I'm JC Allen, your host. Check me out. We're out. Peace. Bye. Later.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast Pirate Parlay on YouTube, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.